Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the conversation series because creators are businesses.
What we do is not simple.
Give, the fans everything that they deserve.
Being creative
is like doing a 5,000 piece puzzle.
Is something that you can learn and do over and over again.
Always be as authentic as I can be.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the conversation series. I am so excited. I've got Meha Agrawal here with me. She's the founder and CEO at Silk and Sonder. Silk and Sonder is an incredible company. It is a San Francisco-based VC-backed self-care and self-improvement brand that not only uses guided journaling, they also have emotional health tracking and other really incredible research-backed techniques from CBT, positive psychology, bullet journaling, all of these things that hopefully we've all kind of heard about today, but it's collectively coming together with Silk and Sonder. Meha, thank you so much for joining me today.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
I first want to hop into, you've really been in technology-based companies for a lot of your career. You've worked and you've helped build a lot of incredible companies and be part of things. Silk and Sonder was born from your own experience with burnout. What was the moment you realized, like, hey, the traditional hustle mindset wasn't sustainable for you anymore? And how did that spark the blueprint for what Silk and Sonder is today?
Yeah, great question. So I think, I didn't realize it at the time. I now know a lot about burnout flavors, right? So I think there's traditional burnout, which all of us experience. That's the overdrive burnout where we're just going, going, going. We're exhausted. We can physically feel it. We can mentally feel it. But there's this other type of burnout called under-challenged burnout, where you are disconnected from your purpose. You don't feel fulfilled. You maybe aren't working that many hours, but the hours you are working are just not, or doing whatever, it doesn't have to necessarily be work, but you just aren't feeling like yourself, like something just feels off. And so for me, that moment was in my mid 20s. I had, already gone through my various rock bottoms and ruts. I had, broken up with my shitty ex-boyfriend. I had moved cross country. I had applied to grad school. I got in. I got full rides to grad school. I said no to grad school. I ended up in San Francisco working at the time for a company on the verge of going public. And so, yeah, life looked amazing on the outside. I was dating my then boyfriend, now husband, but I was waking up unfulfilled, ungrateful, unhappy, but like not enough to know what to do about it because it looked and felt great from the outside, right? And so that is what I call under challenged burnout. I was a software engineer at Stitch Fix, which everybody is like, oh, that's so great, but it's just not, it wasn't my calling and it hadn't been for a while, right? And so that's when I knew something had to change because I fundamentally realized that I was living this life that wasn't aligned to my true core values and purpose. And I had checked the boxes of what success looks like in someone else's definition of success. But ultimately, true success is defined by the journey, right? Not just the destination or the outcomes or the fancy gold stars that you're collecting. It's really how do I feel day to day? And that's when I knew something had to change.
I love that. And I love that you identified the types of burnout too, because I don't think a lot of people actually think about the types that there are. Like burnout feels different for every
100%.
person.
Yeah. And I would say the third that I didn't talk about is neglect burnout, where it's kind of this victimy mindset of like, what's the point of trying? I'm just going to accept it as is. And then you just kind of operate your day to days, just like from a mental standpoint of nothing's going to change. So there's nothing I can do kind of situation. So you just neglect your needs. And so, I think we all have different flavors of burnout throughout our lives, and it's important to recognize it so you can do something about it.
And you've talked about really leading with heart. And I love that because there are so many different ways to lead. But I appreciate this one the most. What does that look like in practice as a founder building a data-backed, kind of science-informed, community-centered self-care company today?
Wait, I love the way that you described Silk and Sonder, by the way. I'm definitely going to steal those words in our marketing comms. So, when I think about how I started Silk and Sonder, it was it was built from heart, right? I was working on a different startup idea at the time. I was feeling exhausted. It wasn't going anywhere. I had perfectionism, perfectionist tendencies. So nothing was getting launched. I wasn't talking to any customers. It was kind of a fake side project startup situation, right? And I was reading a ton of books around personal growth because that's what aspiring founders and
Always.
CEOs do for fun. And I kind of realized like, holy crap, this is actually really interesting stuff that these authors have researched, but there's no mechanism for me to integrate this into my daily life. And similarly, the techniques that a therapist or coach would give you, or bullet journaling was really popular at the time. It felt very inspiring, but it was like, oh, like now I have to like, oh, go get a blank journal and like create this framework for myself. And oh, I want to track my habits, and like there's no way to do that. And my habit tracker does not look like what I just saw on Instagram. So really for me, I built this product from heart because I needed it, right? And then I realized, wow, all these other women need it. And then I started listening to them. And so when I say like building and leading from heart, it's not just being empathetic for empathy's sake, it's really integrating the ideas and feedback from your customers and becoming curious with your own product development journey to then continue to build, and not being so fixated on how many of these did I sell? Are we growing? Are we, like what does retention and churn look like? Oh my God. And there were times in the business where I had to lead by head, and some of that was great. I think I've become extremely sound in business acumen and everything like that. However, recently, especially after becoming a mom this year, I feel like true magic is possible when we lean into like feminine and authentic leadership and build again from heart and lead again from a heart. And so that's really just, my way of saying that I am going towards what excites me and energizes me as opposed to what I think I should do as a founder and CEO.
I love anytime someone who, it really describes their company as somebody that is really community backed. It's so interesting to hear how they became community backed or what that means in
Yes.
definition for them, because it's always something
So
different from everybody.
different.
You and I, before we started
Yeah.
recording, we were talking about Facebook groups. It's so different to hear how people engage and really
Yeah.
hear from the community that they're trying to capture, and what does that look like. And so I love that you went into that, because I think it's so, that's how you build a company. You really have to listen to
Totally.
the people that you were trying to sell your product to, or whatever it is you're trying to achieve with your company.
Yeah. And I mean, I love that you bring this up because every founder nowadays talks about community being table stakes, and then they brag about their vanity metrics on Instagram
Yeah.
and say, "Oh, I have a community." And I'm like, that's great. Like, yeah, you have a variation or a version of community, but when I think of true community, I think it's measured by like the depth and the relationships you actually have one to one with your customers. And so I remember in the early days, speaking of Facebook groups, I felt very lonely, and I realized I am dancing around in circles here trying to get us to product market fit. What if I just created a Facebook group and asked my customers what's working, what's not? And then what transformed was people talking about how they're using Silk and Sonder. They were showing, their actual pages. They were talking about really, really vulnerable stuff. And I was like, wow, that might be my superpower, is that I've created this safe and vulnerable space. And I was using that space myself to talk about how demoralizing the fundraising process was as a solo technical female founder of color. And so they were like hyping me up. So it was just as much for them as it was for me. And then we eventually brought it
Yeah.
in-house and launched our community events and whatnot. But yeah, like you said, community comes in different flavors. I think founders need to hold themselves accountable on if they're going to call themselves a community-backed business. Like you should be able to tell me like at least 10 people's
Oh,
names in your community. Yeah.
yes. Yeah, and it's so interesting too, because even as you were talking about that, you've almost got your own little case study that you went and created
Yes.
in that Facebook group of just this feedback cycle and the things that, you're not going to be able to please everybody with that feedback cycle,
Yeah.
but what are some obvious things that you're hearing from people that you're saying,
Hmm.
you know what, we can do those things. So it's always so valuable just to be able to hear those little
Totally.
tidbits, but it's also inspiring. Like you said, you're being able to hear from people maybe you wouldn't have been able to hear from if it wasn't for those opportunities and for them
Yeah,
buying into Silk and Sonder.
absolutely.
Walk me through it, Silk and Sonder blends the journaling, the CBT, the positive psychology, and you've got AI powered coaching now
Hmm.
as well too.
Hmm.
What gaps did you really see in the wellness space that made you believe like these modalities needed to be unified together with Silk and
Yeah.
Sonder?
Great question. I think the biggest gap that I saw at the time and still see is that people think action is what's going to get them from point A to point B. So that's why they're buying the annual planners. That's why they're like checking things off the to-do list
Yeah.
blindly and all that. And what I found is that as you develop in your personal growth journey, reflection actually brings much more clarity, and then you can take faster, more intentional action. And so the biggest gap I saw was a couple of things. One is we fixate on outcome goals, especially in the beginning of the year, right? We set our New Year resolutions and we're
Yeah.
like, we want to lose X number of pounds or we want to start a business. And then it's like, cool, like you want to manifest that? How are you getting there, right? And so I felt like what was really needed was monthly recalibration, monthly reset to really adjust and fine tune how you're planning to get from point A to point B. So regardless of when you set your goals throughout the year, it shouldn't just be January 1st. You're able to kind of, reflect on what worked, reflect on what didn't, and then tweak things as you go. And so that's really the monthly concept and how it was developed because it gives you just enough time to integrate new habits, to cut out bad habits, and to actually get some new information about yourself month over month. Um, so I really felt like the monthly cadence was missing. I think the breakdown from your outcome goals into your process goals and, habits that you need to form, and also just the reality that mental well-being and your productivity is really dependent on how you're doing across many areas of your life. And so it's important to track your sleep. It's important to track your moods. It's important to track your meals because then you can visually correlate patterns. And so that's why we have a lot of trackers in there. So you kind of go from reflecting and then you go into intentional planning. So what are my goals for the month? And then you have your trackers and then you actually have your daily spreads, which is where you really have, like flexibility on whether you're using that as a journal or if that's as a planner, but it's still useful to see what your day-to-day looks like and what could have changed or been better by the time the next month rolls around. So that was the main gap I saw in the wellness space from a tactical standpoint. And even till this day, we're the only kind of dated monthly planner meets journal that comes to your home every day. And then on top of that, I felt what was missing is community. I mean, now we see community events and we're seeing all these community things pop up, but back then only Soul Cycle had figured it out for fitness and Weight Watchers was there for weight loss. But when it came to true mental well-being and personal growth, it was so self-navigated. And so that is when I realized, oh my God, Silk and Sonder needs to be this, gym for your mind and heart to help you live a life with more clarity and joy along the way. And so that's really where the community piece came in. And that's why we started having these group, coaching classes and things like that, where you can set up your journals and planners together, or you can do, exclusive activities. Because we want people to just have that feel good dopamine effect that you feel when you go to the gym, but when you do these activities from Silk and Sonder.
Can I say, as a type A person who loves a planner, who
Yes.
loves having things written out and all of
Yeah.
those situations make me so happy and it really is one of those that stimulates my mind in a good way where
Yeah.
I'm not freaking out. I'm not like, I'm able to focus on all of those things.
Totally.
It's super helpful. And it kind of just aligns perfectly with what you're trying to achieve. And it makes it so
Yeah.
you're not having to scramble or figure out a million different things. You can
100%.
really stay focused on what you're trying to achieve with
Totally.
whichever, bullet journaling, whatever you're trying to
Yeah.
you plan for your
Yeah.
goals, whatever it may be.
I think what really sets Silk and Sonder apart is it's guided enough to help you get started, but flexible enough for you to make it your own. And that's what we find with members that have been with us for years. They start a certain way and then they kind of transform it, and they use, our daily rituals in the app and our community events to help inspire them with new ways of doing things. And we all know that there's science behind novelty, right? It boosts motivation and confidence. So yeah, there's just a lot baked in, but we try to make it fun, easy, and approachable.
While we've given everybody a real taste of, what Silk and Sonder has done, I really want to get into the weeds with you of just, how you went from nights and weekends project to today a venture-backed company. What was kind of, that whole process and like the
Yeah.
earliest signs that Silk and Sonder had that product market fit?
Yeah, great question. So, um, it was a nights and weekends project when I was still a software engineer and product manager. And I grew that to about 1,000 paying customers by the time I decided to go full time. And I actually had an offer from Bonobos that I had accepted, and I ended up rescinding, my acceptance because my husband, my then boyfriend, now husband, he kind of told me, like, he was like, what do you have to lose? Like, you've been a CEO for a while, like since I've dated you. And, why don't you just give this a shot for 6 months? And it kind of got to this point where I was promising a level of personalization or community expansion, but I wasn't delivering on it. So I felt kind of guilty on what I was able to, because I was shipping orders off by myself and, answering customer service emails. So I think for me, it was really eye-opening to feel like I'm almost disappointing my customers by not going full time. But I was scared because I didn't have that much personal runway. I didn't have that much conviction that I could go out and raise. And so I had to do a lot of reflection in true Silk and Sonder form around what kind of business do I want to build? Do I want to make this a lifestyle business? Do I want to pocket the profits and kind of move on? Or do I want to make this really big? And I just felt like Silk and Sonder's mission is to really create this vibrant, accepting world where people are living more intentional and authentic lives. And to do that, I would need some capital to hire a team, to streamline things, to keep me in kind of the visionary mode so I can develop new products. And so for me, it was that moment of clarity that led me to actually go down that hard path of fundraising, which wasn't easy. I had to talk to a bunch of people, but I actually did run fundraising again in a way that was authentic for me. So I didn't just do it the way that everyone was telling me to do it, like numbers game, cold call, or like warm intros. I did the opposite. I cold messaged people that I thought would be interested. I I focused on the people that I thought would convert at the
Yeah.
highest rate. And a third of my cap table are people that I cold emailed, and that wouldn't have happened if I didn't trust my intuition and reject, I think what people told me to do. So that's kind of what led me down that fundraising path.
I love it. And it's so interesting that you went the cold call route. I like that is one old school style, but it's also like there's some bravery there that I don't have with the cold calling
Yeah, well,
situation.
it's so funny because I don't have that bravery now when I'm like trying to do it with like buyers for retail or like, those types of things. But there was just something empowering to be able to do it with investors because I could be very thoughtful and they appreciated that. So it wasn't just like, hey, like spammy. It was very intentional and it took me like
Love that.
30 minutes to craft an email. But yeah, it's scary. But I think once you get a couple wins, then you're like, oh, like what's the worst case? They don't even respond. That's it.
That's my thing that I've loved to live by is what's the worst they could say is no.
Yeah.
And it truly is like it seems so complex and something that just emotionally drains you.
Yeah.
But it is one of those things like what's the worst that they could say is no. And
Yeah.
most of the time now when I'm even doing this and pitching people, I'm like, I'd rather you respond and say no to me
Yeah.
than somebody
Totally.
not respond at all because it's one that you can just close book, next and
Yep.
move on to the
Exactly.
next thing. It's one of those that
Exactly.
it's kind of emotionally just better to be able to do
Totally.
that.
Totally. Yeah.
I want to talk about habits and building habits that actually stick and how really Silk and Sonder can help with its products. We've talked about this a little bit, but just
Yeah.
was it kind of that you've seen that Silk and Sonder's helped people build these habits and
Yeah.
actually continue them.
Yeah. I think habit science is so interesting, but I think what people underestimate is the compounding effect of starting small and, and then what happens by the end of the year, right? Like if you become 1% better every day, then you're 37 times better by the end of the year. And so I think what Silk and Sonder does really well is we have weekly habit tracking and daily habit tracking. And what I always recommend people is when they're starting out, they should pick habits that they know they're just gonna check off, like things that they definitely do every day, just because it gives you that like validation of like, yay, I do something consistently in my life. But the weekly habit section is what I recommend for people who are either trying to make a habit a daily habit, but it's a new habit because it's unrealistic to be able to do a new habit every single day, right? And then the second is like the things that you don't necessarily need to do every day, like maybe you work out 4 times a week, and that's totally fine, right? So that goes there. So I think the layouts really help visually show you
Right.
what's not sticking. And then I think the other thing that's really cool is when you see that the days I did X, new habit, I felt better, then it kind of motivates you. And that's where the mood tracking and habit tracking together comes in. Or if you like, if you ate certain foods and those were the days that you felt kind of
Yeah.
slumpy, like that's all very eye-opening. And I think it just motivates you in a way that is difficult to do if you don't have that visual access. But ultimately, this boils down to what I said earlier, which is Silk and Sonder also has these live master classes where we teach you how to write good outcome goals and then how to decide realistic process goals that you start with. And because it's a monthly cadence, you don't have to commit to it forever, right? So, like, if you want to start a business, or if you want, say, for example, you want to start a business, right? And part of that is you need capital, so you want to fundraise. So then your habit is like, I need to like reach out to investors every single day, whatever. It's not working. Okay, then maybe your next month's habit is actually applying for loans or like whatever, So there's just a really awesome way to kind of reflect and reset. But the process goals really are what makes it, right? And those are the healthy habits.
I'm such a visual person as well.
Yeah,
I love my type A. So like seeing things and seeing like those check boxes or crossing things off the list,
totally.
always
Yes.
super helpful to have. But it's always nice to be able to reflect and look back and say, to your point, okay, I worked out 4 days this week.
Yeah,
I'd like to get to five or whatever it may be. You can look
exactly.
back and see, but you can also correlate to things of like, okay, these things happened in this week.
Hmm.
It kind of is one of
Exactly.
those that it helps not like take the weight and make you feel better about yourself, but it is one that you can say, okay, the habit is there, but when things happen like this during the week,
Yeah, totally.
I
And then
made
you
it
redesign
difficult.
you
Yeah.
redesign your week, right? Like I'm struggling with it right now because ever since I had a baby, I'm suddenly operating in a very unnatural way. I'm more of a spontaneous person. I like to decide the day hour before I go to the gym when I go to the gym, and it's not working because, by that time I have to kind of do the handoff with the nanny. And so it's like I recognize that I'm in that phase of life. So like, what do I have to do? I have to plan my workouts ahead of time and I need to commit to it. And, so I think it's a constant dance with habits. But I think what the Silk and Sonder community really figures out is it's all fluid and you get to evolve and come back to, different seasons. So yeah, it's really powerful to be able to just visually see things and also be forced to track things that or like at least be encouraged to track things that you wouldn't normally track. Like I don't really track my sleep or my meals and stuff, but during postpartum I did because I needed
Yeah.
to see what was happening. So yeah.
I like how you said it too. It all kind of evolves with people's focus in life. Everybody
Yes.
is changing. Every month is different.
Yeah.
It's important to acknowledge those evolutions as well for everybody because what you could have prioritized last year or even last month is not what you're going to prioritize this
Totally.
month or this year. So it's
Totally.
always good to give yourself that leniency as well to kind of, like you say,
Hmm.
that fluidity.
Yeah, absolutely.
You are I'm gonna just boost this even more. You're a technical solo South Asian American female founder in a space that's both personal and emotional.
Yeah.
how has your identity shaped how you build, lead, and really connect with your community?
Yeah, what a great question and so layered. I think so. I'll start with the female side. So that I would say, I think authentic leadership, feminine leadership, being able to really understand our customers, I just think comes very, very naturally. I think our products are feminine forward because we really want to empower women since they, A, control 86% of household spend, but B, they're underserved. I mean, having gone through, an emergency C-section, I can tell you women's health is not where it should be. And so we can at least make our dent in mental well-being and personal growth. I would say the South Asian identity is really interesting, and also being an eldest daughter of South Asian immigrants, I think there is a level of responsibility, velocity at which I can churn out things, and I would say level of excellence. So I really grew up in a household where A pluses were not really like celebrated. They were just kind of accepted,
Yeah.
or sorry, expected. And so I think for me that can backfire, right? So that means, you do have some wins, you're not the best at celebrating them, you kind of dismiss them. But it also has served me. Like I think being a perfectionist is bad, but having a baseline level and expectation for excellence is actually good. And I think that is what I always tell people who want to work at Silk and Sonder. This is not a traditional 9 to 5, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show just because we're a wellness company. We're a company where we believe that wellness and performance are two sides of the same coin. So it's less about how many hours you're spending, it's more about energy management, right? So I think that my South Asian side comes out in the culture that we build here at Silk and Sonder, and also the ability to do many things at once. So I was told early on, you need to focus. Are you just doing community? Are you just doing journal planner stuff? Are you just doing the app or whatever? And I was like, this is an ecosystem, guys.
Yeah.
Like, let's get with the program. And I think that's attributed to my background, also being a computer scientist. And I also, I double majored with that in business. And so I was used to taking 5 classes when the average person was taking 3. So and that's not because I'm special. It's just I'm insanely curious, and I like to operate with a level of intensity and curiosity that I think is maybe higher than the average. And so that really trickles down into what we're able to accomplish for our customers.
Can I just say, eldest daughter, virtual high
Ah,
five. Love
yes,
we
it's a real thing, right?
it's a real thing. And as I've gotten older, there are things that I'm like, oh, it
Yeah.
really is an eldest daughter kind of
Totally,
situation.
totally. And my husband is a middle child, and both my parents are middle children. So you can only imagine
Yes.
what that's like.
Yeah, we have a lot of scenarios in my family where it is oldest and youngest child, and
Yeah,
all of us are kind of looking at our counterparts,
yeah,
and we're like,
yep.
us, that's us.
Totally, totally.
Um, Silk and Sonder isn't just, solving stress, it's also tackling the loneliness epidemic that
Mhm.
really, when COVID hit in 2020, really got a light shined on it. What does belonging mean to you personally, and
Mm.
how does the product then intentionally foster connection across generations?
Yeah, great question. And the reality is, 1 in 2 US adults are classified as lonely, but we don't even realize it. So it manifests itself in the feelings of stress and anxiety and burnout and all these things, but really it is some kind of loneliness flavor. Um, I think the way I define belonging is first and foremost, you have to feel accepted and belong to yourself, right? And how is that achieved? You have to have a lot of clarity on your identity, and that comes from understanding your personality, your mindset,
Yeah.
your limiting beliefs. Like if you don't know who you are, and a lot of people operate their lives thinking they know who they are, but if you're feeling anxious or stressed and you don't know how to bounce back, that means you don't know, you know? And so I think first and foremost, you have to really build that self-trust muscle. You have to have clarity on who you are, what you want,
Yeah.
even if you don't know how to get there, right? And then belonging is, we've successfully created a space through Sonder Club and our Sonder social events where you are celebrated for being who you are. You and I might be radically different. We might have polarized views of the world. We might have very different political and social beliefs. We might come from very different backgrounds, but we can coexist because we are both confident in our own skin. And so I really think a lot of women come to Silk and Sonder because on some level they feel lost. They feel like they've lost their identity either through a transition or people pleasing or recovering perfectionist, whatever it might be. And Silk and Sonder really just helps you become more you because we're giving you a ton of tools through not just our journals, but through our extended content in the app and then our AI powered life coaching to quickly understand who you are and why you're wired the way that you are. Because personalities, whether you like it or not, are relatively fixed by the age of 7. And so, unfortunately, we have to kind of
Yeah.
accept us for who we are. And then mindset is what we can change, like how we respond to certain behaviors or how we, you know, get ourselves in cognitive distortion, distorted thinking, like all of that can be adapted. And that's what Silk and Sonder really helps you flex as a muscle. And so to me, belonging and connection is all about supporting one's ability to understand themselves and then fostering an environment where everyone's encouraged to be themselves because then we're all, operating at a higher frequency and we're all feeling that connection.
I just want to double down real quick. By the age of 7, that's new information for me, which is
Yeah,
crazy to think about. Like
crazy.
thinking back or trying to remember when we were
Yeah,
7 years old, just the level of shenanigans or whatever we were all up to at
yeah,
the age. But it's so funny to think about, if we're able to remember that timeline, if it truly like, if we feel that we still resonate with that 7-year old
totally.
that was, just being a kid,
Yeah,
being a
being
kid
a
at
kid.
that
And
point.
it's like I think when I say personality, I'm talking about, your Enneagram, like
Yes.
things that are kind of hard coded in you. And that is shaped by our parents, that's shaped by our environments. Obviously, you can kind of be malleable because your brain's still developing until 25 for women and I think 30, 35 for men, but it is it's if you really look at the true essence of who you are, who you could have been, with certain support, like that's you, and that's what you're here to do, and that's why human design is really interesting and all these things. And I think there's so many tools out there, but they are so disjointed that Silk and Sonder really brings them together, and then again brings it back into this reflection meets action component. So you're always taking that new information and like learning about yourself and becoming more of who you're meant to be.
Now, being community focused and really hearing what people have to say, like what has been the most unexpected insights you've learned from
Mm,
your customer data and your community engagement about how people kind of actually take care of themselves?
yeah, that's an interesting question. What has surprised me about how people actually take care of themselves? Honestly, so I think it's really interesting because we have different personas, but there is a big group of individuals who they think of Silk and Sonder as their security blanket. Like they walk around with their Silk and Sonder. They have a special space in their home for their old Silk and Sonders. Like I chuck most of mine, right? Because I use mine more like a planner situation. But there is so much joy in them reflecting on how far they've come. And I think that level of compassion one has for itself kind of surprised me. And the fact that we cultivated that for them because, they weren't like that when they first came. I think that was very interesting is like caring for yourself isn't just about what you're doing tomorrow. It's about acknowledging how far you've come. So I would say that's one. I think the other thing that has surprised me, but when I looked into the data behind this and the science behind it, it makes sense. Generosity has a huge impact to our emotional well-being. And so when I see how Silk and Sonder customers are even taking care of themselves, it's being generous with our community in terms of the advice that they're giving, pumping up others, like really being available for these strangers within Sonder Club is an act of kindness for themselves because they also feel like they have purpose and that they're relevant and that they have this, special space that they belong to. So I think that's been kind of a like an interesting observation of
Right.
that is actually self-care, right? Like caring for others can also be an act of self-care. And so I think that's also been pretty interesting. And then I would say I think those are probably my main observations
Yeah.
actually around.
It's so interesting because everybody's kind of got their thing of kind of
Totally.
how they you have your bubble bath people and your
Yeah.
how they that's how they relax at the end of a
Yeah.
day, or you have the people that just want to sit on the couch
Yeah.
and
Totally.
do absolutely nothing, or they do the social media scroll or
Yeah.
whatever it is. It's so
Yeah.
interesting today to hear how people kind of regulate that nervous system
Oh
and
yeah.
like to kind of come back to themselves after
Yeah.
whatever has happened at work, school, whatever.
Totally. Totally. Yeah.
I talk about success a lot with people, especially with entrepreneurs and people who have built companies. And I always find it interesting. How do you find success today, and how has that changed since 2019 when Silk and
Yeah.
Sonder really became a thing for you?
Yeah. I think when I started Silk and Sonder, I was still focused on chasing gold stars and shiny objects. And I think success to me was the outcome, was the numbers, was, all of that, right? And I'm not saying it isn't that, but now to me, if you want to track whether you are successful or not, it is about how regulated you feel in your body. It is about taking stock of, am I enjoying this journey right now? Right. Like there were periods of the business where we were doing even better than what we're at right now. But the process was exhausting and I was burning out and whatever, right? So for me, success is more about the journey and living in alignment with my core values and my desires and all of that, and less emphasis on I'll be happy when I get to A, B, C, D. Like I'm like, am I happy right now? Am I enjoying right now? And that way you can course correct. And that to me is a truly successful life and business is if you feel good while doing it. Because otherwise, what's the fucking point?
Yeah,
You know?
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
If you're exhausted and you're not enjoying it, like yes, money is great and success
Yeah.
is great and all that stuff, but if you're not sitting there at the end of the day with the biggest smile on your face or
Totally.
tears in your eyes because you're like you can't believe that you
Yeah.
just got to be able to do that, it's like what to your point, it's what's the fucking point? Like what are we
Exactly.
doing all these
Like,
things
what are we
for?
doing here? Yeah. I
Yeah.
would have stayed at Goldman if I just wanted to make money. But I think there is this I catch myself, right? Because I will get fixated on like, oh, we aren't big enough yet, or
Yeah.
this bad thing happened. But then it's like pause, like, whoa, but you live a life that, is affording you time freedom and flexibility and things that you did not have. So I think that's how I would like really success and joy should coexist together.
I want to end this with one last question of for those high performers who struggle with slowing down or turning inward and kind of looking at ourselves, what's one Silk and Sonder practice or even a prompt you wish every person would try at least once?
Ooh, such a good question. I think the prompt that I would recommend to high performing achievers who struggle with slowing down is because I think gratitude doesn't work for those types. Like it just feels too hokey. I think I love the technique of brain dumping. And that is this idea of just take out a piece of paper or open up your journal and just brain dump all the ideas that you have in your mind, all the things that are making you anxious, all the things that you're like feeling guilty about not getting to. Like just brain dump. Because I think high achieving people are often ping-ponging between what do I need to do today, but I also like want to do all these other things that will help me achieve the life I want in 5 years. And then, oh my God, like laundry, like your tasks for the day. Like it's just
Dog food,
all
all
of it,
things.
right?
Yes.
And there is so much science around the importance of brain dumping and what that lights up in your brain and also like opens up for your nervous system. So I think don't underestimate the power of just like seemingly nonsensical brain dumping, literally bulletless form. That is a form of journaling, and that's the easiest way for you to realize like, oh, pen to paper actually works. So
Yeah.
that would be my recommendation. And then I would say the Silk and Sonder practice of all of our tools, we have something called daily rituals, which are these bite-sized
Yeah.
coaching modules that I lead. And I find that most of the people that are that productivity type of person, they love the daily rituals because it's just 5 minutes in and out, quick exercise. They feel like I'm talking in their ear and they're like probably multitasking while doing it, but it's still like food for thought, you
There.
know? Yeah, yeah, exactly. So it's kind of it's a forced reset for the hyperachievers that don't want to slow down.
I love that you mentioned brain dumping though, because if my sister will tell you, because she's seen it before, I have
Yeah.
a journal in almost every room of my house. Because at
Oh,
any point,
yes.
I'm like,
Oh,
getting
I
it
love the
out.
idea of putting a journal in every room of your. I'm like running around finding my journal, my blank journal, because I'm like, oh, I have this idea. I need to write it
I'm
down, you
and
know?
I'm probably so crazy that I do have one in every room, but it's just one of those that I'm like, if I have to get up and run, I'm like, it's not the same.
Yeah.
If I have to try to find a journal, I'm
Oh,
like,
I
there's just
love
one
that. What
there.
a great hack. That's like I feel like that's why like hotels have like a notepad by your bed,
Yes.
and then the desk and then like whatever. That is smart. I'm gonna think about that one. Yeah.
They're all different to they've like culminated. I've like find
Yeah.
an
But
area
then
that
do
I
you
feel
struggle with like where did I leave that one note and like you don't remember
most
or
of
do
the
you know
time,
like
no, I have not had that problem yet, but
okay.
it's definitely one where I'm like, if I have a follow-up thought to it, it's the coming back to it there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
otherwise I'm kind of like the connecting dots are all there
Are
so far.
there. That's great. That's great.
It just
It
looks
helps. I mean, writing things down, has been scientifically proven to improve cognitive function and memory. So, like, you probably remember better once you write
yeah.
it down. So, yeah,
If I don't, it's gone. I'm like, it is gone from the
exactly.
mind. I
Exactly. It
have
does
a
not count unless you write it down.
I'm like, there's a reason I have a to-do list and things like I like it just doesn't happen if I don't have it there or else it's just
Totally.
gone from the mind.
Totally.
Gone
Totally.
from the mind. Meha, I can't thank you enough for sitting down with me and having this conversation. I so appreciate your transparency and sharing everything with me. I so appreciate it.
Thank you. You are honestly, these are some of the best questions I've ever been asked. So, thank
I
you for
appreciate
the
that.
opportunity.
You guys, I'm gonna have all of Silk and Saunder's information down below as well as Meha's. Please go check out Silk and Sonder. Find your avenue where you can, where you need help, where you want to kind of make your next moves, and stay connected with everything they're doing. And as always, I will see you guys back here next time. Bye, y'all.